Welcome to the Cedars Symposium. So today we have Dr. Ciaran Clarke, who is a consultant psychiatrist in Dublin's inner city and Associate Professor of Psychiatry in University College Dublin. After specialising in internal medicine, he trained in psychiatry, which he has practiced for 20 years. He specialises in work with young people and has special interest in eating disorders, autism, and personality, and particularly in psychotherapeutic approaches in many of these areas. Dr. Clarke will be talking today about mental health and adolescence. So Ciaran, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So thank you very much for coming over to Zoom.
Thanks very much, Pablo, for having me. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you. So I guess the first question today is what challenges one might encounter during the development of an adolescent, particularly from the point of view of educationalists and of course parents.
Well, I think that teenagers and families, indeed schools, are facing a lot of difficulties these days because, well, in terms of the young people themselves, I think there's a couple of things that are really important to bear in mind. It's really important to know something about the natural development of children and young people and adulthood, and also to be aware of the environmental constraints that we're all under anyway. So an adolescence is a particularly challenging time for young people. It always has been. I think it's because I think we can talk about development if you want, about the way young people develop. I think part of it is also that that young people are all different. We're all different, but often we expect them to be the same. And in adolescence, this is particularly the case, and we so often we're not good at adopting. But if I could just say something about the way, maybe trying to make sense of the difficulties that young people have. I think that when we're looking at young people's development, we're really talking, and mental development, we're really talking about development of the brain. It's a bit of an oversimplification, but because we're not reducible to our brains. But in the development of a young person and a young person's personality, there are a couple of critical periods, and adolescence is one of them. It's a time of great change in the brain. And the other thing is that development in all areas doesn't occur at the same rate. Am I okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I could show you, say, a brain here, okay? This is my brain, okay? This is the back of the brain, and this is the front, okay? This part here is called the prefrontal cortex. In humans, it's larger than any other, proportionally larger than any other animal. And it's an interesting area because with the prefrontal cortex, it's an area associated with pretty complex, what we call higher order functions, like planning, like social relations, social cognition, moral judgments, mood regulation. Okay, so, and just we know that, say, the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex is associated with mood regulation, and we can talk about what that is. And orbital medial frontal cortex is associated with taking perspective of other people. So that's really, really important. But the development of the brain takes place gradually, and it starts from the back. So you can see that this part doesn't get developed properly until the end. So that's a bit of a problem. Okay, so you can be quite sophisticated in many areas, but some crucial areas don't develop until late adolescence, even early adulthood. The brain doesn't really stop growing until mid-20s. But some parts deep in the brain, which I can't show you here now, develop much earlier. And one of these parts is what's called the limbic system, which is basically a reward system. And it leads us to react, to respond to possible rewards, okay? So the limbic system becomes activated when you want to, if you're going to bet on a card in a card game, if you're going to respond to a bet to walk across a sheet of ice, say, okay? Or if you're going to face, if you're going to decide, if you're going to decide whether it's a good idea to respond to a policeman who asks you to stop or something like that, okay? But this is developing very early, okay? Yet the system of social cognition and perspective taking and emotional regulation is developing much later. So that's a problem, because we can be less, that can make it very difficult to control what we're doing, much more impulsive. And this is a characteristic of normal characteristic of adolescence. It's a very good characteristic in some ways, because if we weren't risk-taking, we would never get out of the family nest. So it's good in some ways. Just to say something else about social cognition. It's a time of, it can be really a very challenging time for young people, because they become they are inexpert at understanding the mental states of other people, and understanding what other people are thinking and feeling, and sometimes they have they draw wrong conclusions, and sometimes they respond differently to situations depending on whether other people are present or not. So there's very good evidence, for example, that teenagers are more inclined to take risks in the presence of other people. And adults, really, it doesn't make any difference. And children, not so much either. But for teenagers, are pretty sensitive to that. So those are just some of the developmental reasons why it can be a challenging time for young people. So you can see things, how that might play out in things like experimentation with substances, relationships, inappropriate intimacy, problems with the law, whatever. You can see why problems with self-efficacy may play out in kind of demotivation, problems in school, dropping out, bad planning, make people making bad choices that are not in their interest. So
thanks for that, Ciaran. One of the things that sometimes people talk about is, of course, the fact that it's a time of great turmoil, and particularly with modern sort of media and, of course, social media and so on. Can you talk to us a little bit about how to help people achieve mental health or overcoming anxiety or even addictions in the current situation? I realize it's very broad, but just to sort of to give us a bit of insight.
I think, I think that one things that has become like center stage in discussions of mental health is electronic media, and there's a lot to say about that. I saw somebody too this morning who a girl this morning was telling me that she spends like 12 hours a day kind of texting mostly and things like that. And it's, 8 hours a day is not unusual for young people to spend texting, watching videos and things like that. That creates tremendous problems. We can talk about the deprivation that it causes, but in terms of this is like an unreal world where people are trying to often present themselves as different from what they are, and they have to kind of perform. There's an unreality about it. You don't get on the internet. You can be what you want to be. I know somebody who has an avatar, and he said his kind of thing is like, on the internet nobody knows you're a dog, and so people tend to perform and put and their best. It also tends to isolate them. I know you can have 5 million friends, Facebook friends and things like that, but there is a difference between real friendship and virtual friendship. And the physicality of real friendship, of doing things with people, even the kind of thing of exercise and things like that, is kind of irreplaceable. There's a pseudo intimacy that kind of can build up. So it can be very isolating, and so isolation is increasing, and it's kind of a more modern problem that young people are facing. Then a lot of this internet, electronic social media use goes on at nighttime, and that was very disruptive. Obviously, sleep is a major casualty there, and so work suffers, so relationships suffer. There's also the risk of pornography, and I think also it's important to realize that it's not that that the internet is evil. Of course, it's not evil. We're depending on it all the time, and for young people too, it's very good. And then, like, where would we be without the opportunity for online classes now? And during the pandemic, so it's really good. And to get access to we know all the positives about it. But in terms of social things, for young people, it's particularly it's a particular risk, and it's a particular risk, different forms at different ages, obviously. But you could talk more about that.
Ciaran, you've mentioned one of the things which I always find amazing, which is the whole idea of people feeling comfortable in their own skin. Do you have any tips to help parents get their children to be comfortable in their own skin?
Yeah, I think there's what you're talking about is the issue of, I'd say, I think there are two things to that. There's the issue of identity, and there's the issue of anxiety. And both of those can feed into a kind of a low self-esteem. Just to mention identity first. Identity is a core issue of personality. Right? When I mean identity, I mean some sense of identity. So when you think of an adult, they have a clear sense of who they are. They belong they're nestled in a community. They have a job, a secure job. They have maybe parents, children, and they have people, depending on them. often young people are moving between different worlds. They're no longer children. They're not yet adults. There may be ethnic questions, particularly if their children of mixed ethnicities, parents. They may be good at certain things which they may be not so good at certain things which they think are very important, even though they're not. Imagine a kid who isn't good at football, where you would absolutely have to be good at football, otherwise, a person has some physical defect. Imagine, lots of us have a bad leg or something like that. It doesn't really matter so much if you're an adult, it's different being ugly at 65 and being ugly at 15. Mm-hmm. So this is really can be really difficult. Okay. I think that parents have a lot to do there to help kids to develop their sense of identity. It doesn't mean choosing their identity. It means accepting their identity. And that's a work in progress. Personality is a work in progress. Just to say something about anxiety also. Well, there's something paradoxical about where we are, because despite what you may think, the world has never been safer, really. In Ireland now, we're in the middle of a pretty serious pandemic here. Now 3,000 people have died here. It's not good, okay? And it could get worse, In the 1918 pandemic in Ireland, 20,000 people died. It doesn't really merit much. But basically, what I'm saying is the world is, in some ways, things have never been better. Incomes are higher throughout the world. More kids are getting vaccinated. More people are living to longer. But you would not think so. The world is a dangerous place. That's one message we give people. And it's one message we give kids. And that creates problems because young people, any of us, if we see danger ahead, what do? We avoid it. You don't go there. And that's okay if the danger is in the form of a lion in the jungle. You don't want to be going there. But if it's the case of a school dance or an exam, and you're scared, and you don't go there, well, apart from the missing out on the benefits of that you might have had, there's also the confirmation, because your anxiety will diminish. And what's the lesson to you when your anxiety diminishes? It'll be like, gee, I sure got out of there in time. That's one lesson. The next time I'm in that situation, I need to get out of there. Okay. The next time, I get on the plane. I know one thing that will get my anxiety down is get off that plane. Or don't even get on it in the beginning, in the first place. So I'll never get on a plane again. Okay. So, and that further removes the opportunity to test that negative prediction. So you can't test it if you're not exposed to it. Mm-hmm. So, which is, it's a pity that one of the things that we tell people to deal with anxiety is to avoid it in some way or other. You know, we do not teach them to tolerate distress. It's a technical term, distress tolerance, and we don't teach people resilience too well. So people are one of the biggest risk factors for anxiety problems in teenagers is, believe it or not, overprotective parents. And okay, you could say that biology is a confounder, because there is a lot of anxiety is genetic in origin, but we know that for that psychological reason, that when kids see that parents are anxious for them, they respond appropriately. It was an interesting, I read an article recently about a disaster that occurred last year, actually in England. There was some serious flooding that went on, and it was tremendous property damage. A lot of people, I think, lost their livelihoods and their houses were washed away. And articles appeared in the popular press and about, and people were suffering. People were referred to mental health services. There was a lot of talk of trauma and counseling and things like that. That same river had overflowed about 70 years previously in the early 1950s. And 20 to 30, 50 people may have been killed. It was much more serious. Not only were there no mental health problems or suffering, but there was a big emphasis at the time even on resilience. I think even the Queen turned up and commended the people for their kind of stiff upper lip and their approach and their courage, and it was maybe they had survived the war, and that was that they were experienced in that. But we're not good at that. We're not good at building resilience in people and in young people in particular, and we're setting them up for problems in that way.
And how can we do that in a practical way?
I think that a lot of it is about, well, I think there's two. It's a lot about the way we approach it, the way we approach ourselves, and the way we approach the circumstances. Okay. So in cognitive behavioral therapy and psychotherapy, we talk about cognitive distortions. Okay, we talk about, in particular in the case of fear, we talk about catastrophic thinking. Okay, so oh my God, like if I stand up and read this poem, you know, everybody's going to laugh at me, you know, and you know, it's a genuine risk, okay? But you could think about it in a lot of different ways, okay? You could think, okay, how hostile, how really is my audience really hostile? Is my poem that bad? If they laugh at it, is it that big of a problem? Who's generally we find that our negative predictive biases, our negative predictions are not as true. They may not be completely false, but they're not quite as true as we think they are. It's never 100%. It's never black or white. And then we can think about the advantages. We can engage in some sort of what do you call it? Decisions planning. Pros and cons of doing something and not doing it. the advantages of reading the poem, the disadvantages of reading the poem, the advantages of not reading the poem, and the disadvantages of not reading the poem. And nobody ever thinks about the disadvantages of not reading the poem, you know? That's the one everybody forgets, okay? So, you know, without being too theoretical, it's good to talk to people about, to young people about this. And the other thing is to talk about themselves, because resilience is a personal capacity. It's a strength. And think, what have you done before? You know, remember when you did that? Remember when you tried out for the football team? You know, remember when you helped so-and-so? Remember when when you thought that you couldn't do that? And, you know, remember when what so-and-so said about your thing last summer, your English essay, you know? Remember how you used to be much more, you used to get headaches because you were so anxious? Remember that? You probably don't even remember it, but you know, your parents remember it. So, you know, you could easily do this. You could do it in your sleep, you know? It's part of it, it's cheerleading, you know? But it's getting people to, and then this refers to a little bit to what I was talking about before, mentalizing, seeing yourself from the outside, you know? And that comes down to another phrase we use a lot about is acceptance. Accepting yourself as you are. And saying, okay, you know, I'm anxious, okay? I'm an anxious person. I have an anxious personality. But am I going to let that get between me and a good, you know, the opportunity to make some friends here? You know, after all, I could, you know, how long will I have to suffer this anxiety for? Maybe just 20 seconds. Anxiety is not dangerous. Often we think parents, and this is parents want to, with the right intention, they want to protect their children from anxiety rather than from the danger itself, and anxiety becomes the danger. So it's okay to be anxious. And you know, it's okay for kids to realize that they're anxious. Well, I can do this. I have nerves. What? You know, you may die with that, but you know, you're going to let it become a handicap for the rest of your life.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Ciaran. Perhaps just to finish, one of the things that we're finding in the UK, of course, we are in the middle of a great pandemic like in Ireland, and we are having a very serious lockdown at the moment. And one of the things that we find, of course, is that it affects adolescents particularly hard. Do you have any tips to perhaps help teenagers see the lockdown as an opportunity for growth? I mean, it is very much a challenge, like you were saying before. So how can we, if you like, help students or our sons to grow, but at the same time, not get bored in the middle of the lockdown?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, the whole population is affected and faces a similar challenge. I think that the number one thing I would say is structure. You know, one of the things that the pandemic does, the lockdown does, is it throws structure out the window. And particularly if you're not going to school and, you know, okay, your online classes and that sort of thing, but things are much more fluid. And so I would say, certainly you need to be getting up in the morning, and to be getting up in the morning, you need to be getting to bed on time. I would say this to adults as well. None of us are getting enough sleep, by the way. That's a separate chapter, okay? But so, and then electronic media plays into that, but they need to be getting up, kids need to be getting up on time. They need to have a schedule, just like adults. And they, another problem is that, I mean, the lockdown does offer some potential, some good things. You know, family intimacy is a great potential. You know, I know some person who was attending the online classes was able to attend the child's classes online and was able to, you know, see how the kid was performing for the first time ever, and saw how the teachers were performing, and was really impressed with the job they were doing. And it gave great insight. But so anyway, so there's great opportunity there. But being thrown all together can create another problem. It can also be a problem. Being cooped up a little bit too much. Probably there are opportunities for kids socializing are limited. Maybe not, but it's good. Kids should exercise. They should get exercise. They should get out and do, at least go for a walk. You know, kind of really, if kids can get some exposure to nature, you know, even walk in the park, go for a run, go for a cycle, meet with friends insofar as they can. That's really good. I think in terms of structure, one of the things that I notice is is meal times. It should be easier actually in the lockdown, but the family meal together. I met a family who's a really good family. Mother is a school principal. Dad is a high caliber project engineer, I think. And I said, do you know like that your child has been eating like bread and jam for the past 2 weeks and nothing else? And mother says, no, we never knew that. You know, and really clever, really good pet family, really good mother. And when was the last time you had a family meal together? Oh, we don't do that. It's on the hoof, you know, in our house. So, and this is during the lockdown because they needed to work, essential workers. So, those things I think, if you know, to cope and to manage, and then again managing online media, managing the electronic media, putting a lid on it, and being careful with content. Good, really important to supervise what kids are using and what kids are doing. Don't take things for granted.
Brilliant. Ciaran, thank you so much. Well, hopefully once the pandemic finishes, we can have you over at the Cedars to talk to parents. So
okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, look, I look forward to it greatly, and it's nice talking to you again, Pablo. Okay.
Bye. Thank you, Ciaran.